Afternoon, guys, and welcome. Just clicking live on Instagram as well. Excellent. Okay. All right, got some people coming in already. Fantastic. So welcome, guys, this afternoon to Freedom Deals Live. Today is going to be something quite different. So it will still be me on here, but I've also asked a member of my team, Michael, who's been with my team since 2021. And he heads up my acquisitions for our development business, and he's joining us today. So to give you a bit of a background, so Michael, how long have you been around development? I know you're a qualified surveyor.
Yes.
When did you start with that? How many years ago is that?
So that's about 35 years ago. And I've worked in surveying and town planning, development management and acquisition since then.
Right. So between Michael and myself, there's about 45 to 50 years of development experience. So that is all available to you today. And what we're going to do is take you through a slightly larger site than what we normally work on in these sessions. And we won't do this too often because when you're starting out, I would strongly recommend not to start with larger sites, which you've all heard me say before. And today you'll probably see a bit of as to why that is. There's just a lot more moving parts. There's a lot more to consider the larger the sites. But as you go through your development journey, you build up the skills to do these things. They can also be very exciting and very lucrative. So it's somewhere you can certainly aim, and I'd encourage you to aim to build towards, but not something I'd recommend for your first project. But starting to learn these things is going to put you in good stead for the future. And it is still going to help you out with 1 and 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, those smaller projects when you're first getting started. So this is a real project. This is existing in the market at this time. It's not technically on the market. So it's one we've looked at for many years. Now, why am I sharing it today? Well, look, you'll see as we go through it why I'm happy to share this one today, even though it's a live deal in some respects. This potentially could be a 1 into 15 lot project, could be more depending, but we'll come into that and we'll come across, we'll work through why that is. Now, before we get started, remember this is not financial advice. Never, ever go ahead purchasing a property without the appropriate financial advice and professional advice. This is purely for educational purposes. So make sure you seek professional assistance before making any financial decisions. If you've got any questions, please pop them in the comments. Actually, do our usual tech check, guys. Can I get in the comments that you can hear me and that you can see me? And when I can see that, then we will kick off. So just quickly in the comments that you can hear and see me, please. All right, got no one confirming it yet, so that's always an alarm bell. All right, guys on Instagram as well, if you can confirm in the comments that you can hear and see me, that would be much appreciated. Just a quick yes in the comments, and then we'll kick off. Hi, Evelyn. Fantastic. Thanks. Can always rely on you, Evelyn. Good to see you. Okay, so let's kick off. So this is potentially a 1 into 15 lot subdivision. Could be more, could be less. Let's go through it and see what we can uncover. And for those that have just joined, I've got Michael from my team who leads my acquisitions team on the call today. He's been in and around development for 35 years as a qualified surveyor, and he's going to take us through the journey of what he has been looking at on this site with me. So first of all, I'll point out that we're on the Brisbane City Council City Plan. So thanks, Rachel. And these are, a lot of these tools are free. That's the first thing. A lot of these tools are free and available to anybody. And there are a lot of paid tools out there that will promise to solve all of your issues and put it all in one place. Personally, I don't use most of them. I prefer to get it from the raw source because then I know exactly what I'm looking at. And I don't like some of the paid tools do, I guess, their own interpretation, which can sometimes be incorrect. And the danger of some of those tools is you need to be an expert to be able to identify the incorrect information that you're getting given, which obviously if you're not an expert, that's dangerous. So I prefer the raw source. So this is Brisbane City Council City Plan interactive mapping tool. So what we're looking at the moment, you might see there's the red and white boundary around the property. That is the property in question. We've got the Gateway motorway behind it to the north, so a very significant road there. And we've got Bracken Ridge Road on the other side, which is not an insignificant road either. So this is really tucked into, one major infrastructure road and one relatively major. We've got the green, what would you call it, diagonal lines shading across the site. That is a high ecological significance. As a developer, as soon as you see anything to do with ecology, environment, koalas, all that sort of stuff, that's got to throw up a big red flag for you straight away. Doesn't mean it's an insurmountable challenge, but you definitely cannot ignore it. And if you were to say that tides are shifting, the tide is shifting more and more towards environmental things having a larger and larger impact. So just always got to be very mindful whenever you see anything involving environment, that you definitely need to get your advice from your ecologists, your engineers, your town planners. Yeah, don't ignore it is my short version. So Michael, what are we on?
Yes.
Okay, so what tool we're on here? What are we going to look for on this tool? What are the other overlays? And actually, let's start with this, because we've got the green showing as high ecological significance. Now, for the guys that are looking at the screen live, you'll notice to the left, to the east and the west, that there are the outlines of subdivision plans over existing properties. So those are approved plans and already under development. And you'll notice that they are actually over some of the shaded green area, which is interesting. So, Michael, from your experience and our experience, how important is that overlay, and when can you develop within it, and when can't you?
Well, it's very important, as it gives a firm footing from council right from the beginning of where they see, and it may not just be council either. It may be the state government putting that overlay there. It's too early to tell here, but certainly, if the impact of it is that you'll have to do an ecological study of that area in detail, look at the existing trees and fauna, and come to a conclusion as to whether and how valuable that area is to each local authority and state government.
Yeah, and probably worth highlighting, guys, one of the biggest mistakes that people often make is they look at a site and they go, oh, my site's clear. It's covered in ecological overlay, but I've got no trees. The site's already clear, so it doesn't impact me. Wrong. If the overlay is there is every possibility that they may require you to revegetate the site if you go for a development approval. So don't fall into the trap of thinking that because it's clear that makes that overlay useless, because it absolutely is not the case. So it's definitely one of those ones where the truth is you actually just don't know the impact of it until you speak to council about it and your ecologist about it, to actually assess the impact of that and what their appetite for it is. Because depending on the urgency of the development, or what their appetite is for the area, they may be more inclined. They may say, look, the priority of this development warrants the removal of the vegetation. But in many cases, they will not. In many cases, they will say, tough pickies, you can't use that part. It's got to be. So what else are we looking for while we're on the city plan, Michael?
Well, now in this section on the left over here in the city plan, it gives us all the overlays that attach to the property. And I won't turn them all on because some are more important than others, but certainly there's acid sulfate soils at below 5 meters AHD here that can be overcome through earthworks. It shows you the road overlay hierarchy.
We won't get too carried away with that stuff, Michael. Let's we don't want to have people fog over.
Probably.
This is more as an introduction to larger sites. We don't want to get too deep into that stuff just yet.
Yeah, okay. Probably the most important then is the transport noise corridor overlay. I'll just turn that on.
So you remember that I said we're wedged between two major pieces of infrastructure here, and boom. Okay, so you can see that from a noise perspective, this site is quite significantly impacted. And you can see over to the side there that there is a key for what those colors mean. Now, we can also see there are active developments happening within that yellow and the light orange sector to the east and to the west. So this isn't to say that the site can't be developed in these areas because of the noise corridor, but what you do need to certainly consider is that what impact is it going to have to the value of the blocks at the end? Because depending how it is impacted by that noise corridor will also impact how that dwelling is constructed to deal with that noise. And basically, wherever you've got a heightened level of noise impact or fire overlays or anything like that, your construction cost for the house is going to increase, which by nature decreases the value of the land. So ultimately, when that house goes to get sold in the future, let's say it's worth 800,000. Well, if it costs 400,000 to build the house, then you might be able to argue that your block is worth 300,000 because they're going to want, some equity in going through the trouble. But if it's going to cost them 450,000 to build because of issues with the site, then that's a pretty strong argument that your block's only worth 250. So just be aware that anything that is from your site or an issue of your site that devalues the property or increases the cost of construction on that property, that directly impacts the value of your land. So this is unlikely to make it much of a difference on how many lots we can produce, but it will impact the value of those lots. Okay, Michael, what else are we looking at here?
Well, really, they're the big ticket items from the overlays here. You can drill down and have a look at where it is in the overall plan for Bracken Ridge.
Well, actually, before we do that, so just guys, I want to clear off on a usual one. So overland flow and flooding. There is none on this site, but that is something you can also use the Brisbane City Council or whatever council it is, their interactive mapping to look at the overland flow and the flood impact. Definitely something you want to be taking a very close look at. But in this case, the site is unaffected.
Yeah. And when you drill down into the city plan, this site is in a specific area in the Bracken Ridge Road catchment. And at a high level, this is what council wants to achieve in this area here. That's our site there. There's to be a northern link road through here, that dotted line, and an acoustic and vegetative buffer against the Gateway motorway.
Which in short is just a bunch of trees to try and block some of the noise. So what we're looking at here and why does it matter? So if you're doing smaller projects, you're not typically going to have to deal too much with master plans. But when you start looking at these sites that have been previously rural or large acreages and that sort of thing, when they decide to redevelop those areas into high density, typically they do it with a master plan in mind. Otherwise, the road networks just end up being absolute chaos. So it doesn't mean that it is going to be exactly this. Like we can see that, just put the cursor on that dotted line. The yellow dotted line is where they've indicated to be a connecting road. But if we look at the approved plans for the sites that are already under development to the east and the west, it doesn't appear that yellow dotted line connection road is being actually put in place. Where Michael's indicating on the map there, you can see a road stub in that existing development. And then if we go back to the city plan, Michael, you'll see on the site to the east, just turn off that noise overlay. There we go. So you can see that site to the east there, that one also has the stub. So it's pretty clear that council sees a road connecting in between there. So you've got to account for that in your lot layout, that there's going to be a road through there. But there's nothing indicating that there's actually that other road further to the north. Definitely not something you'd want to just dismiss. There's nothing to say that it can't still be put through there with those existing roads, turning up to the north and then coming round. Because ultimately, if they decide they want that there, you're going to lose lots. And on a 15-lot subdivision, if you're going to lose 1 or 2 lots, that's a massive impact to your feasibility. Massive. So that's definitely something that you're going to want to get the appetite from council on pretty quickly to see if they have any intention of putting that connecting road through. Just flick back to the master plan, Michael. Thanks. Now, the other thing too, which I guess on a simple way gives you some comfort, is there is a master plan. So council has appetite for developing this space because they've created this master plan telling you so. Bit of a newbie fail that I see a bit is people that go out and just buy these acreage properties or these large lots because they think, well, it's a big property, we can develop it. No, it doesn't work that way. If council doesn't have an appetite for it to be developed, you're not going anywhere with it. And the other thing too is you can even have a situation where council has appetite to develop it, but if the infrastructure is not in place to support it, then the zoning might be there, but if the water and the sewer and the stormwater, if all that infrastructure is not in place to support redevelopment of that area yet, you might be waiting years. So that's just something to be mindful of as well, which your engineers and your town planners are going to point that out to you when you bring a site to them anyway. It can actually still happen on smaller sites. There are certain areas where they are just flat out saying no more redevelopment currently because our sewer station just we can't handle any more capacity. So it's rare, but it does happen. But again, you'll find that out when you talk to your consultants before going unconditional on a site. Okay, Michael, anything else you want to point out on the master plan before we move on?
No, that's about it there.
Okay, great. Let's go to the doll before you dig.
Okay.
Actually, before we go on, guys, questions. Haven't had any questions come through yet. So from what you've seen so far, any questions? Remember, the more interactive you make this, the more you're going to get out of Michael and myself. And there is no silly question except for the one that you don't ask. So please make sure anything that pops to mind, you do pop in the comments and ask as a question. And yeah, we will certainly do our best to answer it. Anyway, we'll let questions come through in the meantime. So Michael, you're showing us a picture of the gateway. Why are you showing the guys that?
There's a planned Bracken Ridge to Pine Rivers upgrade of the Gateway Arterial. And we know for a fact that it's going to take land on either side of the existing Gateway property boundaries. At this point, we've got a very good idea on the northern side of where that's occurring and how much land is being taken. But at this point on the southern side, it's less clear. We believe there's less land to be taken, but exactly how much, we're not sure. So that's just another known unknown, if you like, on this site that will require further attention.
Michael and I have a very acute relationship. Acute experience with this area. We actually lost 2 sites to the expansion of the gateway, and so it is something to be not to be taken lightly when they resume sites and those sorts of things, because depending when they resume sites, it can have, you can do okay out of it or you can do very poorly out of it. Unfortunately, the timing for us was not great. So that's, you never take that lightly, and you've always got to be aware of that when you're developing near major infrastructure. You definitely need to be looking at what could happen in the future. And in our case, that wasn't even visible. We were looking, it wasn't visible. But that all kind of happened because of the Olympics and things going back to front. So Gary, I may have missed it. What was the use of the master plan again? So the master plan, that is a specific precinct in Bracken Ridge that council has identified for redevelopment. And when they do that, they typically provide a master plan, which is not saying this is exactly how it has to be, but this is kind of just showing a rough idea of what council's vision of it is, so people can start working towards developing it in that fashion. So in this case, in broad strokes, they're showing that green buffer along the highway, basically telling you you're not going to be putting houses here. This is going to be a green buffer for acoustics, vegetation buffer. You can see it around that other estate to the west, on the north and the west of it. There's a vegetation buffer there, and they're showing roughly where they see the connecting roads. But as we're seeing in this case, it doesn't actually seem like they're going ahead with the road network as they've suggested here. It seems more like it's going to be one through the middle. But yeah, so the master plan is just showing you what is their intention here. As more properties get developed in that area, you're going to see more clearly that coming to fruition, and you're going to get a better idea as to what are they actually putting in place here. Because it definitely always, pretty much always varies from the original master plan. But when you're starting out, that's the best guide you've got. And minimum lot size from Richard. Michael, remind me, actually, what's the zoning on this one? I actually can't remember what the zoning is.
Emerging community.
Yeah. So there's not a specified, I wouldn't say there's a minimum that you would count on in emerging community. There are certainly numbers that are thrown around, but emerging community gives the council a lot of discretion in terms of what the lot sizes are. And you typically might look at the ones next door and say, oh, well, that's sort of the lot configuration. They've gone there and they've gone whatever size that is. With emerging community, you actually can't bank on that. I have known friends of mine that have done developments in emerging community that at the pre-lodgement meeting were told, 400 or 500 square meter average block size is what we're looking for here. And then when they went for the DA, they did a backflip and went, oh, actually, we've decided that we want lifestyle blocks here and we want them to be 1,000 square meters. That's a horrendous impact to your feasibility. So that is something with emerging community you do need to be very mindful of. Is it is designed to give the council a lot of discretion. I would never proceed with an emerging community site without a pre-lodgement meeting. And even then, you need to understand that what they say in the pre-lodgement meeting doesn't necessarily mean they have to go through with that when you go through with the DA. So hence why we always say with larger projects that, with larger projects, it's so important to, I'm just going to put my phone on Do Not Disturb, sorry guys. It's so important to have healthy margins because there are so many more aspects where things can just be changed and can make a big difference to the project. Okay, next.
All right. Did you want to look at the DBYD? We just did that before, didn't we?
We didn't really get to go through it though. So the difference here, like with the other ones we've looked at in these sessions, guys, where we've been talking 1 into 2, 1 into 3, that sort of thing, what you're typically hoping to achieve in those sorts of developments is plug and play. In a perfect world, you want the services right in your footpath. You want the block sloping towards the road, so stormwater's easy and sewer's easy, presuming sewer's there. And you just want to be able to plug in to the existing infrastructure. However, as soon as you go to build a road, you are obviously the one building the infrastructure. You are installing the sewer main. You are installing the water mains, the new communication network, the new electricity network. You are the one installing the infrastructure, not just plugging into existing. So we obviously need to know that it exists at first, which you can see here. If you zoom in down the road, you got water and sewer both in the footpath. Yep, can you just zoom in for us there, Michael? Down the bottom, there's yep, good. So we've got blue being water, red, maroon being sewer. So we've got both of those there. That's a good start. Now, this site is very flat, potentially even too flat. It might require a small amount of fill just to actually achieve appropriate fall across the development to have stormwater flow to the right areas. Don't know that yet, but it's possible. But it's certainly quite a flat block. So we know we've got water and sewer there. Now, like we've talked about, why is sewer more challenging than water, guys? Pop it in the comments for me. Why is sewer and stormwater more challenging than water? Let's see who's been paying attention the last few sessions. Why is sewer and stormwater more challenging to provide solutions for than water? All right, I'll give you a few more seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so the reason being is water is pressurized. So water can be pumped uphill. That's not an issue. So the natural flow of the land is not an issue when it comes to solving the water issue. Whereas sewer and stormwater need to go downhill. They need to flow. They need gravity. So if, yep, correct. Yeah, water can be pressurized. Well, the water is pressurized, so it always is. So in this case here, we've got the sewer in the road there. We've got a flat site, so we're going to be able to provide sewer without an issue. We may need to fill the site a little bit to get the appropriate fall. Same for the stormwater. But just remembering that, yes, in this instance, because we're building a road network, we are going to be the ones building the infrastructure. Now, the other thing too being, if we just go back to the city plan, Michael, as we know, sites have been developed to the east and it is coming from the west, but that's not yet done. But the one on the east is underway. So the services will also have been brought through in that development and into that road stub. So you would expect that there will be existing water and sewer and communication and power there, which would also be able to be tapped into. Of course, you're not going to take that for granted, but it's highly likely to be there. Okay, so let's have a look at a feasibility, Michael.
What about the layout we did last time?
Oh yeah, good point. Okay, so let's have a look at that one first. So this is a site we've looked at multiple times over the years, talking directly with the owner, through agents. They've kind of gone off the boil and come onto the boil. And so this is one example of a layout that was done a number of years ago. And when we did this one, I don't think those other sites were approved or under development yet. So there was even more unknowns at the time. But this was just an example of something we proposed to the owner when there was the possibility that they wanted to stay in their existing home. So it would have been a case of developing that back portion and leaving the existing house as it was. So you can see we created that road through the middle. And at this point, it seemed that we were going to have to create that road to the north as well, which now seems less likely. But this is just an example. And the reason I show it to you is, you often see people displaying their developments after all the problems have been solved and once you've got to the end. But I just want to show you that, look, this is a site we've been looking at for years. And that was a first draft layout. Definitely not what you do now. So it is a case of failing fast, just trying different things, looking at different ways, constantly turning it and looking at it from different directions and looking to get a different angle from on the project. So the layout now would most likely be entirely different to that. The block sizes would probably be smaller based on what's happening around the area. Again, not taking for granted, it is emerging community, so you definitely need the appetite there. What are your other thoughts on that layout, Michael, and how it might be different now?
Well, then the road from the north is unknown now, and you can see we put it into a cul-de-sac head, so that probably wouldn't be appropriate either. So if there was a road from the north coming through, we'd have to squeeze out that cul-de-sac head, delete that, and have the road coming through like this and bending around to meet a future road. And certainly without keeping the owner's property, there's whole scope of area here for lots to come in here. There's probably something important that we haven't mentioned is that in the future there's going to be a service station here. So we've checked the files on the adjoining property, and we know that they have an approval for a service station next door. So that's gone into our thinking in relation to pricing for these lots as well when we come to look at a feasibility.
Yeah, it's good to be close to infrastructure. Petrol station right next door, not ideal. That's a bit too close. It's kind of like being close to a train station. You want to be within walking distance of it. You don't want to be within eyesight of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Same for a petrol station. Okay, cool. All right, well, let's look at some numbers. Now, for those of you that have been joining these sessions since the beginning, this is a different feasibility template, and this isn't one that I have released in general in our portal. And the reason being is I don't want to encourage people to be doing projects of 5 lots or more when they first start out. Once you've done a few smaller ones, if you then come to me with a larger one, no worries, happy to provide you with this template. But I'm exposing you to it now so you can start to see the tools that we use as we go bigger. So this is the same tool we use for 20 lots, 30 lots, 40 lots, 50 lots, 60 lots. That's the tool we use. This is the tool we use for that. So just zoom in for me a little bit, Michael, just so the numbers are a bit bigger.
Okay.
But we won't go through every single line on this, but to give you broad strokes, that top section there is where we put in the parameters for the deal. So basically, how long is it going to be in the DA phase? How long will it be in operational works phase? When is it going to settle? And the reason we have that in this situation here is your finance model is often quite different in large developments. With a smaller project, you're probably going to get an 80% lend from your financier, a normal investment loan, residential finance to buy the site. And then you're probably going to fund the development with cash or investor. In those smaller gap, that's the cheapest way to finance them. And then eventually you reach a point where commercial finance tends to make more sense. But with these sorts of things here, often what will happen is the site will either be under a very long settlement, or it'll be bought with cash, or it might be bought 50-50 cash and debt. You rarely, in terms of your top tier financiers, you're not typically going to get better than a 50% lend on raw land, if that. And you can get higher LVRs on land if you've got a track record with second tier or private money lenders. But you can get a higher LVR there, but you're also going to pay a lot higher interest rates. So then you've got those interest costs chasing you the moment you've secured the site, which can be challenging and can be stressful. So that's as much as we'll cover in that top section. But if we go down to line 15, so we've got professional fees. So we've put in there professionals prior to DA 7,000 per lot. So everything here is per lot. So once you jump to that road network stage, you start basically talking costs per lot rather than, it's going to cost me $5,000 for the sewer. It's going to cost me this for the driveway, because you're doing everything in volume. So here we've allowed $7,000 for professionals prior to DA, another $7,000 per lot for professionals post DA. Now, where does that number come from? You'll notice I've got a percentage over to the right there, 11.57%. So experience has taught me that around this size of project, that the professional, the consulting fees, so that's your town planner, your engineer, your surveyors, all of those guys, your ecologist, typically it's going to end up around 12 to 14% of the construction cost. That's a rule of thumb. It does vary from project to project, and based on the complexity of a project, we will make discretionary changes to that. But that's where we start. This is a first run VISO. Now, if we go down to construction costs, we have services and earthworks, electricals and comms, and contingency. So as a default, I have my contingency set to 10% on construction. Again, I'll change that based on discretion, but never less than 10%. I do see people that work on 5%. For me, I think that is incredibly risky. That disappears very quickly. Electrical and comms, we've got at 10,000 per lot. Now, rule of thumb there tends to be 7,000 to 9,000 per lot. We've put 10,000 in this one. Services and earthworks, 100,000 per lot. Now, let me tell you that when we were doing this exact same sort of thing in 2021, I think we were using around 50 to 55,000 for services and earthworks in 2021. Now, good luck achieving it for less than 100,000 per lot. It is very common that it will end up being 120, 140, 160 plus. But given that this is quite a flat site, at this point, it looks quite simple for construction. We'll start there, fully understanding that as we dig deeper and as we talk to our engineers, that may increase. Richard, percentage of site allowed for roads and pavement. Look, general rule of thumb that is accepted is about 30 to 35%. Some would say maybe even up to 40%, depends. It is a little bit case by case for certain councils. Michael, your take on that? In master plan communities, for instance, we work the other way and look at the amount of land, saleable land from the gross, and it was always about 63%. But if you took that back to infill, it's probably more like 75%. So you're looking at about 25% for roads. Yeah, and I mean, one of the big reasons why when you do the master plan communities and that sort of stuff, guys, why it's a smaller amount that is saleable is you're always putting in parks and other facilities. Yeah. So there's a lot more land that is effectively donated, but among other things, but that's certainly one of the reasons. So, okay, so we've got that. We've got our statutory contingency, I've said, statutory fees. Again, applications prior to DA and post DA. Where do these numbers come from? Experience. These are our provisional numbers that over time we have learned that is appropriate. Obviously, we adjust those from time to time as costs escalate. Street landscaping, similarly, it's a number that we've found that has worked for us per lot in the past, depending on the size of the development. General expenses, honestly, that's just $10,000 thrown in there because things always pop up. We've got an acoustic fence, we've got acoustic vegetation, we've got revegetation, and we've made allowances there per lot. Again, where are those numbers from? Experience. Now, you might look at that and go, oh, well, how am I ever going to do that? Well, when you get to that point and you've done your 1 and 2s, your 3s, your 4s, and you've built that experience and you make that leap to doing your first development where there's a road network, that's fine. We work together then and I can help you with those things. Don't be concerned that you don't understand where these numbers come from now. No one did before they did one. But anyone to do one without someone looking over the shoulder, in my opinion, when you make that leap, I certainly made sure I had people looking over my shoulder. Okay, land tax, we've got some basis of holding costs. We've got some project management allowance there if we want to. And then we've got our total development cost at the bottom, which is including the purchase price, the finder's fee if there was one, and acquisitions costs, so stamp duties, legals, all that sort of stuff. So we've got, in here at the moment, we've got a purchase price of 3.5 mil. So that's giving us a total development cost of 6.43 mil, excluding finance. So just take that in for a second, because what you're looking at there is roughly half your development cost is the land. like roughly half the development cost is actual construction. Whereas when you look at infill development, where you're doing 1 and 2s, 3s and 4s and that sort of thing, your purchase price tends to be a much larger percentage of the cost. Whereas the bigger it gets, the construction actually becomes the bigger element. Well, case depending, I suppose. Now, finance here, the only thing I'm going to highlight really for you in finance that is different to our other template that we use for the smaller developments is you can see here that I break it up into 2 sections. I break it up into acquisitions finance and development finance. And effectively, the definitive line that I create there in this model and that feeds all the formulas in the background for calculating the finance is acquisitions finance. I count as the finance we have in place and the cost of funds up to the point that we start construction. At the point we start construction, we normally have a different facility, a construction finance facility, come into place. And it's typically when you can access a higher level of debt because you're at a place where there's a clear picture for the lender. This is what our site is going to be worth at the end. These are the blocks we're going to be selling. You might have pre-sales. And so they're typically happy to give you a much higher level of debt at that point. Whereas beforehand, all they've got is raw land. Once you get to the point of construction, at the very least, they've got a DA approved site. They've got an operational works approved site that they could flog off if they needed to. But they can see a clear line of sight to that end outcome. So depending on the lender, now you can see in cell E55, we've got a 47% LVR there. That's calculated at 47% on the net value at the end. So as in your net sales. Now, 47% might seem quite low. Why is that? Because when you get to this sort of project and you're dealing with construction finance, it's not just LVR they look at, it's debt to development cost ratio as well, which you, Michael, can you just highlight that one for me? Thanks. So there you can see it's at 65%. Many of the tier 1 lenders won't go beyond 65% in the debt to development cost ratio, which is quite often what caps them out rather than LVR. Your tier 2 lenders and your private money lenders tend to have more scope to go wider in that area and go higher in that area. But in this case here, I've put that in as though we were funding it with someone like Westpac, where they're going to do a maximum 65% development cost ratio at a 7% interest rate. And we'll leave it at that. We're not going to go dig too deep into the finance. But now you can see at line 63, our total development cost, including finance, is now 6.9 million. Now, how many lots have we allowed for here, Michael? 15 lot subdivision. All right, let's have a look at it. Yeah. I think it's actually in the spreadsheet there. What's that total development cost, including acquisitions per lot? 461,000. So that's our cost per block to develop it is 461,000. It's on line 63, Michael. Yep. So the one above it is excluding acquisitions cost, and the one below it is including acquisitions costs. So ultimately, if you can only sell the blocks for 500,000, you've got no deal. There's not enough margin in it. So that's something you want to be looking at. And obviously our ratios will show us further down, but that's a place you can be looking immediately to go, okay, what's this? How's this looking? What is it costing me per block to develop? Now, broad strokes, we've put in a number of 630,000 per lot in this feasibility. I'm not actually claiming that that's 100% accurate. I've told Michael not to put a whole lot of time into this. We know the owner's expectations on this one are unrealistic in our opinion. So we've put in a number of 630,000. So gross realizable value of 9.45 mil. You scroll down a bit more for me, Michael. And then you can see we've allowed for marketing, we've allowed for sales commissions, we've allowed for legals and GST in the margin scheme for selling the land. And never forget the margin scheme. You are required to pay GST typically. And then down the bottom, you can see bought at 3.5 million, it would make a 1.7 million profit at 2.4% return on cost. And so you can see in our formula there, we've got below, we can set what we want the ROI to be, where we've written 25% on line 108. And then it tells us the price next to it, the exact price we would need to buy it at to achieve that ROI. Now, why 25% and not 20? because when you're doing these larger sites, like I mentioned, there's a lot more space for things to shift and make a drastic change. You need that bigger padding. You need more margin to make it an acceptable risk for the reward. And good examples too is weather can wreak havoc on these kinds of sites. We're trying to build roads on 2 sites at the moment, and we've been trying to build those roads for weeks, but the rain won't bugger off. So the holding costs don't go away, but the road sure as heck is not getting built. So these are things that you need to factor in the larger sites, which is why I would definitely say always start with larger margins in mind with larger sites. But so this one here, we believe would need to be bought for around 3.5 mil. Now, we could spend a lot more time on this and finesse that a lot more. We could do a lot more due diligence and speak to our consultants and all that sort of a thing. But I know the owner's expectations are significantly higher than that, millions higher than that. So from a commercial perspective, it makes absolutely no sense in our to devote resources to that in our office. And this is what I'm always saying to you guys is you want to get to that understanding as fast as possible as to whether the site potentially has legs or not. And just from running this very rough FISO, which took Michael about 5 to 10 minutes, we already know that we are chasms, a long way away from what this vendor is wanting to sell for. So are we upset about it? Nope. Are we happy that we are not going to spend any more time on it? Yes, we've discovered that in all of 10 minutes. Obviously 40 minutes with you guys taking it through it, but in our office, it took 10 minutes. So questions? And yes, guys, on Instagram, I haven't forgot you either. Now, like I said, I'm not expecting you to necessarily absorb all of this. This is purely just starting to expose you to this sort of a thing early on. So you're starting to see what's down the road, what's at play. What did the other developers pay? Oh, it hasn't been sold. So I was in the other sites, couldn't tell you off the top of my head. But not really relevant either. You've got to remember with development, looking at the neighbor's site, totally irrelevant. It makes no difference to your site whatsoever, and is in no way a guide for what your site that you're looking at is worth. You can have 3 properties all next to each other, vastly different in value. Our 39 lots in Burpengary that we're finishing off stage 2 of at the moment, that's across 3 properties. Now, those 3 properties, all 8,000 square meters each, all exactly the same dimensions. So all the same shape. Now, truly, we paid the same for 2 of the sites and we paid more for 1 of the sites. Truth be told, the one we paid more for was actually the least valuable site. But given we'd done the work on the other 2, it was kind of something we could just plug into the existing, what we were already doing. But those 3 properties, you couldn't say, oh, that one sold for $1 million, so that one should sell for $1 million. Just not the case, because one site has less road than the other site, so therefore it can produce more lots. Another site had to have the water retention basin on it, so you lose 2 lots there. Another site had more drainage, swale drain on it, so you lose more lots there. So what the neighboring site's for is never much of a guide, which I know the agents love to think that it is, but that's the thing with development sites. It's not a case like residential property where it's a comparison basis. It's not. It's run the numbers, run the feasibility, how efficient is this property, and what is it going to cost us to produce the product? But good question all the same, Richard. All right, last questions, guys. I've actually managed to do this in 45 minutes today. This is a record.
Well done.
Any final points from you, Michael?
Oh no, I think we've covered everything pretty well there, Peter. It's disappointing that the owner's expectations are so high, but that's just life in this game.
Yes, it is. So yes, for those of you that are intent on and determined to create a future in development, that is something you do need to make peace with, is that vendors' expectations typically are way higher than what is acceptable in a feasibility, which is why it requires us to comb through many sites to uncover the diamonds. and why you want to use the systems that I teach you to do that as quickly as possible. So you're not investing so much time before you figure out the answer. Okay, last just a chance for questions. Otherwise, we will sign off and call it a day. Oh, okay, we've got a couple coming through. I definitely can't imagine doing this for a long time yet. Thanks for sharing though. Anyway, yeah, look, and that's, Evelyn, that's a healthy place to be. That is an absolute healthy place to be. I'll be perfectly honest. I did this in part because I've had some newbies coming towards me going, oh, I've got this site. It's, 20 lots or it's 50 lots or it's 100 lots. And in part, like, that's insanity. It's absolute insanity. That's never going to end well. So in part, that's kind of what I hoped everyone walked away from here is good learnings, but also going, okay, yes, there is a gap. There is a gap between where I am and getting to this point here. Acknowledge that, embrace that. That's fine. There is plenty of money to be made in 2, 3, 4, 5 lot projects. You never need to go to this, and you can create wealth for yourself in the smaller projects. There's absolutely no need to cross that threshold to building roads. If you went ahead, what would be your next few steps, please? Okay, so next few steps, good question, Richard. Next few steps would be, if possible, get this under contract so we have an element of control over it, and at least then we have a price locked in. Now, the bigger the sites go, sometimes that's not always possible, but that's ideally what you want because you don't want to go investing too much time on sites without having control over it. But from that point there, next would be to then go and meet with our consultants. So talk to the town planner, the engineer, in this case here, the ecologist because of the environmental overlay at the very least. Get an understanding of the impacts of the noise, but that we can sort of judge by what they're selling the other lots for as well around that area. But yeah, that would be the next steps which is typically always the next step when you think a site has legs is go and talk to your consultants because they're either going to be coming to you going, yeah, this is a good site. No, we like the plan you put together. We think it's reasonable and you can probably get that many lots. Or they're going to go, here's a whole bunch of stuff that you probably don't know. Bang, 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 bang. Here are all things you need to consider, and it will impact the developability of the site. So, yeah, next step is deeper dive in with the consultants. Any other thoughts from you, Michael, on that? Next steps?
No, that's about it. That sounds good to me.
Excellent. All right, guys. Thank you very much. I hope you got value out of that. Actually, before we sign off, just pop in the comments what was the most valuable thing you got out of that, or the most surprising thing that you saw in what we've just gone through. So either a key learning, something that really surprised you. We'll watch again. Thank you, Peter and Michael. You're very welcome. Yes, for those that are part of the subscription, you have access to watch the recordings as much as you like. So we're building obviously quite a library there, and that's also the idea as to why I'm doing a variety of deals. Is the idea is I'm trying to create a library for you there, where when you come up against something, you can go back in there and search for appropriate sites that will be relevant to the sites you're looking at. So that's the big picture aim of building that library of due diligence. The master plan was a must to see. Yes, absolutely. When it comes to larger sites, you have to keep that in consideration. I can't share anything about it now, but there's something pretty significant I'm working on in Melbourne, which it may be months yet before I can share anything about it. But when I can share it, it'll be very exciting to share, and you will see there the big picture in how master plans come into play and how you can use those to spot opportunities. And definitely a few unknowns. Yep. And look, development, there are always the unknowns. The thing is making sure there's an appropriate reward for the appropriate risk and identifying everything you can and putting measures in place to either manage it, remove it, or reduce its impact. All right. Awesome, guys. Thanks for your cooperation. Thanks for your comments and your questions. Very good. And so remember, next week we have the masterclass on Tuesday night at 7 p.m. So there will not be a Wednesday Freedom Deals live session next week. Next week is the Tuesday night masterclass, and we have Sonia sharing her real deal. So this is a deal that is currently in play that she has secured, and it's an absolute cracker. So I hope to all see you Tuesday night at 7 p.m. That'll be held on Zoom. See you there, guys. Bye. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everybody.